That rainy, gloomy day is forever stuck in my memory. Father Luther kept talking about my father and his virtues, but in fact, my father was a highly respected man. Everyone in our town knew the name Ravenwood. I looked back toward my stepmother, Rebecca. She had been shedding tears since the funeral procession started. I stared at the young face, trying to figure out if she was really grieving for my father. They had been married only 4 months. Then I looked over at Finn Montgomery, whom I hadn't seen in over a month. Esther Maragorn was holding my hand. She had been my father's friend for over 20 years, and she was raising me as if she were my own mother. The funeral's over. As we were driving home in the carriage, questions buzzed in my head. Why were there 2 teacups on the table in my father's study? Who had been there with him before he died? Why did one cup smell like a flower, something like the freshness of citrus, but with a touch of bitterness? Was it the remnants of the scent of poison? And what did my father, or his killer, burnt in the fireplace? I had a chance to glimpse an unburnt sheet in the fireplace, or rather, a tiny piece of it. It was an expensive writing paper with a marking. On the unburned fragment, I saw the remains of some kind of image. It was a circle and a straight line coming from it, and a single preserved letter D next to it. As soon as I crossed the threshold of the house, memories took me back in time. It was as if I could hear everyone running around the house again, fussing because the guests would be arriving in a few hours. Dad had just married Rebecca a month ago, and this reception was supposed to be in honor of my young stepmother. A few hours before the appointment, Rebecca gave me an earring she'd found in her and my father's bedroom. She was sure it was mine. Without even looking at the earring, I thanked Rebecca and headed to my room. I had a knack for losing little things, especially earrings. So I was glad that at least one of the divorced couples would be back together. Only in my room did I get a closer look at the earring. I realized it was the first time I saw this piece of jewelry. A smooth aquamarine dangled from its tip. With mixed thoughts, I tucked it away in a drawer. If it isn't Rebecca's, and it's definitely not mine, whose is it? Once the guests arrived, I completely forgot about that earring. I approached my beloved Esther, trying to cheer her up, but it was impossible. She kept repeating what I had already heard her say dozens of times. She said that with this marriage, Father dishonored my mother's memory, that he had neither thought of me. Esther despised Rebecca and called her a trophy wife who had wooed my father and married him in a matter of a few days. As much as I loved Esther, I couldn't listen to her anymore. I spent the rest of the evening dancing and laughing. He walked into the hall, Finn Montgomery. For 3 months, he had been actively courting me. When Finn was around, I felt like all the girls were jealous that I was the one to become Finn's date, and I enjoyed that jealousy. And then I saw Finn and my dad walk into the study. That could only mean one thing. Finn would ask my father for permission to marry me. However, the next day, Finn didn't show up. He didn't show up on the second and third day either. I responded to every doorbell, to every sound of a carriage outside, to every note or letter brought to us. But he didn't come. I didn't see Finn Montgomery until the day of my father's funeral. According to my father's will, I will be able to dispose of our assets only after the age of 25. Until then, Rebecca will be my caretaker. Another term of the will was that all the assets go to me and my husband, who becomes the caretaker instead of Rebecca. In this case, Rebecca will receive monthly maintenance payments that will not be equal to what she gets while I am unmarried. Look how well things are turning out for Rebecca. Did she really poison my father? So I decided that I wouldn't drink or eat anything from my stepmother's hands ever again. During the first few mourning days, Rebecca and I hardly ever went out or hosted anyone. But our silence was broken by Finn's visit. My heart nearly jumped out. What is he doing here? He rushed over to me and grabbed me in his arms. He kept declaring his love, whispering sweet nothings into my ear. Within the next couple minutes, almost through tears, Finn was explaining his long absence, talked about family matters and the family estate. After the apology, what I'd been waiting for a month ago finally happened. Finn asked me to marry him. But whatever my feelings for him, I wasn't about to betray my father's honor. There could be no wedding until the mourning period is over. Nothing can override the rules of mourning. At that moment, Rebecca and Esther entered the room. Rebecca's face changed as she led Finn out of the house. She ordered me in a stern voice to stay as far away from him as possible. Esther quarreled with Rebecca, saying that she was standing in the way of love. But Rebecca answered very firmly, "As much as you don't want to believe it, Miss Marigorn, I care about Grace. I care about her future. I suggest we end this discussion on how I should protect Grace. You're not her caretaker, but I am." Rebecca walked out of the room with her chin up. Tears came to my face and Esther started calming me down. Together, we realized that Rebecca didn't want me to get married because then she'd be left empty-handed. Esther promised to help me and Finn. The next evening, Rebecca came into my room. She had a package of documents in her hands and she handed it to me. As I looked at documents, pictures, and newspaper clippings, my stepmother told me in a quiet, calm voice that Finn Montgomery was a scammer and a con artist. Chances are, his name isn't even Finn. He's swindled more than one wealthy family. Rebecca and my father suspected something was wrong with Finn, so they hired a detective. That night, my father called Finn in to tell him he knew everything. That's why that con man disappeared from my life. As it turned out, Rebecca looked for the evidence folder in the father's office but didn't find it, so she contacted the detective again. I looked at one of the pages, where I saw an image of dandruff and the words, Warner Detective Agency. That's what the killer had burned in the fireplace. The papers that Dad had from that detective. Did Finn, or whatever his name is, kill my father to complete his scam? Rebecca and I told all this to the police. For some reason, Esther had stopped coming to see us, so I decided to visit her myself. She was glad to see me but asked me to wait for her in the living room. I looked through the books that never changed their place on the shelves. I picked up a volume of Shakespeare. To my surprise, a letter fell out of it. I can recognize my father's handwriting anywhere and everywhere. The letter to Esther said that he had never loved her and asked her to leave him in peace. Startled, I put the letter back in the book. I felt dizzy, so I went out to the garden. I walked over to a bush of pink oleander. The flower was alluring in its beauty, but its scent made my head spin even more. So familiar, like citrus, fresh and slightly bitter. I felt sick. That odor. I rushed back to the house to Esther's room, quickly opened all the chests and closets, and found an aquamarine earring, a match to the one Rebecca had once found in the bedroom. And in another chest under the bed, I found a bottle of oleander infusion. Esther came into the room. When she saw me with my frightened eyes, she understood everything. I tried to flee the room carrying the proof, but Esther managed to stun me with something. I woke up in the basement. I knew no one would hear me. Esther's house was outside of town. Esther's voice came from behind the door. She was talking about how much she hated my mother, how she had tried to win my father after she died. She took care of me to be a great wife in his eyes. Esther went on to say that they had eventually become lovers, but he had betrayed her by falling in love with Rebecca. With frantic anger in her voice, Esther revealed that while my father was dying in front of her, she had promised that she would gladly ruin his girls' lives. She planned for me to fall victim to Finn's scam and for Rebecca to be thrown off the estate. In the eyes of society, Rebecca would be the eventual murderer, and I would be the spoiled and impoverished Grace. I smelled something burning. Esther set something on fire under the door on her side and left. Fortunately for me, the door opened inward. I grabbed the bars quickly and started yanking the door left and right to loosen the hinges a bit. I pulled out the first hinge, the second one, and there I was, free. The only thing left to do was to get out of the house. I was walking really fast, but Esther caught up with me and hit me. She grabbed my arms and slammed me against the walls, but I fought for my life. The smoke had already filled the first floor, and it was getting harder and harder to breathe. I remember myself falling down along with Esther, who was pulling my legs, but I was crawling toward the door. I kicked Esther, managed to get up, and finally ran outside. I ran and ran without looking back, the thought swirling in my head that I was about to be killed, but I ran. Esther died in the fire she set to kill me. I never grieved for her. The woman I thought was my mother turned out to be a despicable murderer, while a stranger preserved my fate. Rebecca never got to be my mom, but she was a great big sister